I'm going to ask a math trivia question. And I'm certain that there are at least about 1 million of people in this room who know the answer. If you do know the answer, you can chuckle if you get the joke, but do not say the answer out loud. Okay, is that clear? Here goes. In a regular polyhedron, all faces are congruent regular polygons. There are 5 such solids: the cube, the tetrahedron, the octahedron, the icosahedron, and what other? Now, if you are confused as to the answer, or why I'm even asking the question, just let it sit for a little bit. About 13 years ago, I started experiencing a set of firsts. But my emotional experience of these firsts were different than how I'd experienced earlier similar firsts. The first such firsts I experienced a decade before were truly firsts. The next one, about 2.5 years after the firsts, still felt like firsts, but like second firsts. 8 years after that, I recognized I was experiencing all these firsts as lasts. This was how my emotional and psychological system was processing having what the Torah calls a ben zkunim, a child of one's old age. Those are the words the Torah uses to try to make sense of Jacob's experience of the birth and the childhood of Joseph. And it's interesting. Our organic memory of Jacob and Joseph and the tale and the enmity sown among the brothers sometimes dupes us into thinking that that was overdone favoritism due to Jacob's feelings about his preferred wife, Rachel. But the Torah's own testimony suggests it was sort of emotional confusion over Jacob's feelings about himself, his aging, his mortality. He was grasping at something. Maybe he, not knowing that Benjamin would be coming along as well, maybe he also experienced Joseph's firsts as lasts. Just a little too precious, a little too tender. And all of this sent his emotions into a tizzy and then led him to poor decisions that created conflict in the family. The decisions to shower one child with love more than any other, I cannot condone that. But the feelings, those I identify with and I can honor. The dizziness of welcoming new life at that apex midpoint of your own life, when your years start descending the other side of the mountain. When the flashes of immortality that can suffuse your soul as you imitate God and create new life crash with the overwhelm of mortality, knowing how much less of your life this new child will get, how much less of this child's life you will witness compared to children born earlier. This is all caught up in ben zkunim, a child of one's agedness. 13 years ago, I experienced a first crawl as my last first crawl. I observed a first word as my last first word. The first day of school as my last first day of school. And at times, the pathos flooded me, and I had to shake myself out of it in order to get back to the moment, to him, to life, to now. Now is all that we have. And now is so fleeting. And now does not last long enough ever. I was keenly aware 13 years ago that part of my obligation during each successive now, when I was there, was to help to start preparing for the eventual then when I wouldn't be. And today I've reached a version of that then. One of the major transitions in the life of a child and a parent, at least according to our tradition. Does not bar mitzvah on some level mean that in your child's life, you are at least somewhat less? I've also recently experienced another one of the major transitions in the life of a child, and that, of course, is the death of a parent. And I've become overwhelmingly and tenderly aware of some parallels and opposites between that birth 13 years ago and that death 2 months ago and this transition today. And yes, all of this will get back to polyhedrons at some point and probably Parshat Mishpatim. For much of the year 2024, I was experiencing the inverse of 2012. I was living through lasts and experiencing them as firsts. My last visit to my childhood home was my first time working through that achy transition. My last visit with my father when he was communicative and with a nudge was able to remember and sing every note to the Ahavat Olam tune he composed for the Ahavat Olam, the everlasting love of his parents at their 50th wedding anniversary. That was my first time really confronting the edge and the end of the sentience of a parent. And my last moments with him conscious was my first time watching a parent ebb into the quietest realm. It brought me back both painfully and peacefully to when I would watch my father nap on Shabbat afternoons in Connecticut. I would watch his chest rise and fall and feel revivified myself and relieved every time he took another breath after a particularly long pause as he luxuriated in REM sleep. Because that breath told me that, yes, he was alive. An experience that was replicated a generation later and even produced a silly but poignant song that Lev and I composed and still sing today. If you're lucky, he might sing it to you later. My last time seeing my father exhale was my first moment as a mourner, as an Avel. I've been trying to make sense of this overlap the last few months, of sadness and joy, of mourning and exultation, of firsts and lasts, of transitions exceedingly different from one another, but also evocative of one another. And as usual, the clarity comes from the tradition, from the Torah, from the exquisite spinning out and refining and expanding of ideas to which our people have been committed for millennia. We come across what might seem like a banal verse in the beginning of the 6th Aliyah. Neither the vocabulary nor the syntax is hard to decipher. Hinei anochi sholeach malach lefanecha. Behold, God says, I'm sending you an angel to lead you. Lishmorcha baderech, to protect you on your journey. Seems simple enough. But to Jews, nothing is simple. The great 19th century Ukrainian sage, the Malbim, Rabbi Meir Leibish ben Yechiel Michal Wisser, it's a good name, he's puzzled by this verse, but not by the verse on its own. He's puzzled with it juxtaposed with a similar verse that comes 10 chapters later in Parshat Ki Tisa. There, in Ki Tisa, God says, V'shalachti lefanecha malach. I'm going to send an angel before you. Is this redundant? Is this new information? In that later section, a rationale is given. Remember, this is in the immediate aftermath of the sin of the golden calf. Ki lo ele b'kirbecha, ki am kishe oref ata, pein achelcha baderech. You're getting an angel because I'm not going to be in your midst. Why? Because you are stiff-necked, and you are rebellious, and you are sinful. If I were among you, I would consume you in my rage. You can now imagine the Malbim's question. In Ki Tisa, having an angel amongst us seems like a punishment, a demotion. We don't get God, so we have to be sanguine about just getting an angel. Well, what about in our parsha? We haven't sinned yet. We're still on the honeymoon. Why does God not want to be with us? Why do we get a proxy for the divine rather than the divine? Malbim's answer is systematically simple and rather convenient as far as commentaries go, but the message goes deep. His answer is that, well, there are two types of angels that God sends. Two valences of a proxy that can attend and be present in our lives. There is one that is merely an echo of God, a whisper. What you get when you don't deserve, or perhaps when you don't long enough for the real thing. That's the angel God sends in God's wrath after the golden calf. That's the most we've earned. And then there is the angel that is essentially God, embodies God. When that angel is among us, it's as if the full divine presence saturates us. This is God the closest to us, the deepest within us that God can get. It's the most intimate of hugs. God is not there, but God is there. That's the angel with which God blesses us in our parsha. Before the fall and the disappointment, this is God training us, not punishing us. Training us to feel that which is not fully there. To live with another, in this case God, fully inhabiting our being, even though the presence is elusive and ethereal, and at times we doubt it. God says to us through that angel, I am with you. I'm still here. Through the prism of this commentary, I sense a closeness between saying goodbye to one's childhood and to one's child's childhood, on the one hand, and saying goodbye to a parent. Both transitions are teaching us, forcing us to let go of something that cannot last forever. Both thunder in our consciousness the truth that eras end, and that what needs your attention is the moment you are in, not the moments you were in. And when those eras end, what is left of them? Here's where the Malbim's image of the angels helps me. In the Torah, the golden calf angel is a punishment. It's a lesser thing. It's a painful thing. It's not having what you would want to have. In the Israelites' case, it would be God's full presence. But in the case of loss and grief, it's your loved one back that you can't get. The immediate shock of grief is that you're being asked to convert a presence into an absence, to confront the diminishment of the angel of a parent in your life. Unlike the Israelites, you committed no sins to deserve this impairment. It was foisted upon you. But the lessening is excruciating and final. But bar mitzvah and the transition to adulthood, that's a triumph. A culmination of something you've been curating for 13 years. And it too marks a retreat, a lessening of a parent's direct involvement and hovering in the life of their child. It is bittersweet for sure, but it's mostly sweet. It's the moment when your primary parental obligation of engineering your own ultimate obsolescence begins to become concrete. It began when he or she took her first toddling steps away from you, around the corner of the room, didn't see you, and didn't panic. It enters a new chapter when you say a blessing, and your child is now independent, obligated, still has to follow your rules for screen time, but thrust into a Jewish adulthood of maturity, responsibility, deciding for himself or herself. With the first 13 years of your parenthood converted into something diaphanous and wispy, it was so ever-present, and now it begins to dissipate, as it must. But the Malbim's image, you are still fully there. The angel a parent should embed within the child at this stage is the angel of Mishpatim, You have all of me, all the time, even when I'm not there. You have all of me if you think of what you have learned. You have all of me if you remember my lessons. As we learn in Mishlei Proverbs, Shema b'ni musar avicha, listen, my son, to the teachings of your father. V'al titosh torat imecha, and do not forget the Torah of your mother. And thus, even as you step into adulthood and spend more of your minutes and hours and days without us, we are with you. Bar mitzvah, then, is so different than death. Of course, joy and achievement and spiritual ecstasy and beginning versus sadness and grief and spiritual depression and finality. But maybe not altogether different, because some firsts are lasts, and some lasts are firsts, and some beginnings feel like endings, and some endings can be mastered and transcended and transmuted into beginnings. The initial punch in the gut at the last breath and Shiva is that this is the Kitisa angel, the golden calf angel, a punishing angel. Just the thinnest whisper of my father remains. But mourning and Kaddish and memory and conscientious and active processing the meaning and the arc of life just might be able to convert a deceased parent into the first angel, the Mishpatim angel, the Bar Mitzvah angel, the suffusing presence angel, the full presence even in absence. Remember the polyhedrons? I used to love math. I was a whiz at it through 11th grade, and then I got to calculus and it broke my brain. I haven't thought much about math beyond algebra since. But I, along with a million or so of other Beth Amers that we know of, and there might be more of you in the room that I do not know of, are in a nerdy worldwide daily and seasonal trivia contest. It's called Learned League. We get one referral per season. For the 25-day season, you get 6 questions a day of some really hard, obscure, cleverly written trivia across 18 different fields of knowledge. And you have to provide an answer to each question, and then based on your daily opponent's historic stats in each category to which you are privy, you have to rank each question with points based on how likely you think your opponent will know something about geography or world history or literature. My top category, anybody want to guess? Sports. Because oddly, there's no medieval Jewish commentator category in Learned League. In my Learned League lifetime, I've gotten correct nearly 70% of the nearly 270 sports and games questions I've had to answer. And among my worst categories, along with art and pop music, though I did get a Wham question right this week. Math. I'm batting just over 30% correct. And then last week, one of the questions was, how shall we say it, very mathy? I will say the question again. Don't say the answer if you know it. In a regular polyhedron, all faces are congruent regular polygons. There are 5 such solids: the cube, tetrahedron, octahedron, icosahedron, and what other? I read the words and my eyes began to glaze over. I felt like Chevy Chase as Gerald Ford. I was about to give up. And then an angel appeared to me. The angel of Dr. Michael Kligfeld, Zichrono Livracha. Math nerd par excellence. My brain started to make associations I was not even aware of consciously. I thought of his question about a tetrahedron and a pyramid made of triangles of equivalent sides, leaned up against one another to make a new shape that has not 7 sides as you would think, but rather 5 sides. And then I heard his voice, literally heard it. Heard his voice saying syllables like hedron. He loved words and math words and technical words. And there was that word he loved to say. the word that denoted a thing he actually understood and could picture in his mind and about which he could make sense of the geometry. A word that I'm still not really sure what it means, but something tells me it might be a regular polyhedron. It might be the right answer. I wrote down dodecahedron. I got it right. My fingers were doing the typing. My father, my mishpatim angel, was doing the thinking inside my brain, as if to say to me, from beyond this realm, the same father-to-son message I want to say today. I'm still here, within you always, even when I am not. Now go and live your grand, wonderful life.